Good afternoon and welcome to the Casa webinar on Gunner Shot. Gunner Shot में आप सबका स्वागत है. वणक्कम, प्रणाम, जय हिंद. At the outset, I'd like to welcome you all on Gunner Shot, which is a channel which is completely apolitical. It has a middle of the road opinion generally, and we don't side with anyone, right? This is the background against which we're going to conduct the Casa webinar. And to conduct the Casa webinar, I have with me General Gautam Murthy, who's the founder member of Casa. He will do the honors. Sir, over to you.
Thank you, General Shankar. Good afternoon and Jai Hind to all the viewers, and welcome to our CASA 40th webinar that we are holding on this, pardon my bad pun, but on this burning subject, Manipur, the way forward. For about 4 months now, Manipur has hogged the headlines in our print, visual, and social media, but unfortunately for all the wrong reasons. The look east policy of the central government, with its huge financial outlay, has come up against a wall of ethnic hatred, playing out its macabre dance of death and destruction in what is our gateway to Southeast Asia and the pride of India. All who are following this, as well as all well-wishers of Manipur, are alarmed, sickened, and frustrated by what they see as helplessness, incompetence, or even complicity of the administration. Talks are ongoing to resolve this crisis. However, rather than getting into the aspects of governance, our eminent and expert panel today will bring you a fresh vision with implementable suggestions which could guide our policymaker to resolve this deepening crisis. And this is what we are looking forward to in this webinar. Let me welcome today the first speaker, Lieutenant General Dr. Shaukin Chauhan, PVSM, AVSM, YSM, SM, VSM, PhD, who was selected to assume the coveted appointment of the chairman of the Ceasefire Monitoring Group in Nagaland in August 2018, post-retirement from the army. Earlier, the general was Director General of the Assam Rifles, the oldest and largest paramilitary force. As chairman of the Ceasefire Monitoring Group, the general was chartered to ensure that the multifarious insurgents groups engaged in insurgency in the Northeast over the last 70 years follow the laid down ground rules and ensure that peace prevails within Northeast India. During this period, he reinvigorated the peace process and was able to bring the NSCN-K that had broken its ceasefire in 2015 back into the peace process and successfully negotiated an extension of the lapsed ceasefire agreement with all the insurgent groups. General Chauhan is an alumnus of St. Columbus School, Delhi, the National Defense Academy, Defense Services Staff College, the Army War College, and the National Defense College. He was commissioned in 11 Gurkha Rifles in December 79. Prior to his appointment as DGAR, he commanded the prestigious 1 Corps, India's largest strike corps, 8 Mountain Division in Western Ladakh, 70 Brigade both in Shopian and Eastern Ladakh. The general is an outstanding scholar general with proven track record, and he was awarded his PhD from the Punjab University for his thesis on India-Nepal strategic relations in the 21st century. He has vast experience at the apex level, having served both in the Ministry of Defense and the MHA. He has also experience in military diplomacy, being the defense attaché in the Indian Embassy for about 3.5 years in 2004 to 2007, and has represented India as well as led a large number of Indian military delegations to the US, Israel, Italy, South Africa, Botswana, China, Myanmar, Bangladesh, Bhutan, and Nepal. He regularly contributes articles and columns in various scholarly magazines and is an acclaimed important voice in India's strategic neighborhood, and is a regular speaker at important strategic institutions and fora both in India and abroad. On behalf of CASA, we welcome you, General Chauhan, and look forward to your views on this vexed problem that we are facing today. Our next speaker is Mr. Sanjoy Hazarika, who combines the roles of a researcher, columnist, mentor, practitioner. He's an author, journalist, filmmaker, policy analyst, and a human rights advocate. A former reporter for the New York Times, Mr. Hazarika founded the Center for Northeastern Studies and Policy Research in India, whose flagship program is the innovative fleet of boat clinics on the Brahmaputra Valley that have reached out to nearly 3 lakh people every year for healthcare. He is regarded as an authority in the region and the neighborhood. He was also the international director of the Commonwealth Human Rights Initiative, which has worked extensively on police and prison reforms as well as the right to information. In 2009, he founded and led the Center for Northeast Studies at Jamia Millia Islamia, New Delhi, the first such center for study of the Northeast region in a central university. His current work gets him closely engaged with the issues relating to rivers, ecosystems, and communities, as well as climate uncertainty and its impact on governance and livelihoods. He scripted and produced over a dozen documentaries, including on the Brahmaputra River and issues about governance and conflict. Currently working on a travelogue of his journeys on the Brahmaputra from Tibet to the Bay of Bengal, Hazarika is a columnist and author of 5 books, including the acclaimed Strangers of the Mist on the conflict in the northeast of India and its neighborhood, and its successor 25 years later, Strangers No More. He has also co edited several books, uh, basically on the Northeast, and his essays have appeared in peer reviewed journals, collections, and anthologies. We welcome you, Mr. Hazarika, to our Casa webinar and look forward to hearing what you have to say on Manipur. Our third panelist is General K.H. Singh, PVSM, UYSM, AVSM, YSM, PhD, retired. General Singh is the first Lieutenant General of the Indian Army from the Northeast. He, as he's an infantry officer, he commanded 27 Rajput during Off Vijay in Kargil in the Chalunka Turtok sector in J&K, and subsequent and also in the Siachen Glacier. He commanded his battalion during the Battle of Point 5770 in the Kargil War in 1998, and for his exemplary leadership of the battalion, he was awarded the Yudh Seva Medal. The general officer commanded an infantry division on the line of control in J&K in the Poonch Rajouri sector. Again, he distinguished himself in the command and was awarded the Ati Vishesh Seva Medal. He was subsequently appointed the corps commander in J&K, and again, on completion of a brilliant command, he was awarded the Uttam Yudh Seva Medal. After retirement, the general was the chairman of the Manipur Public Service Commission, and presently he is a member of the Consultative Committee on Naga Talks and a visiting faculty at the Manipur University. He has authored 2 books, Romancing the LOC and Making of a General, a Himalayan Echo. And as you would have gathered, General K.H. Singh hails from Manipur and would be telling us how best he sees the problem being tackled. Welcome, General K.H., and we look forward to hearing your views from the ground.
Thank you,
Our
sir.
moderator for this evening is none other than the redoubtable General P.R. Shankar, whom you all know as former Director General of our Artillery, an alumnus of NDA Khadakwasla, DSSE Wellington, Army War College Mao, Naval Postgraduate Course Monterey, and the National Defense College, New Delhi. He has held many important command, staff, and instructional appointments in the Army and has given great impetus to the modernization of artillery through indigenization. He is now a professor of practice in aerospace department of IIT Madras, and as you all know, is actively involved not only in applied research but speaks and writes extensively on strategic issues. He has his own blog called Gunner's Shot, which is widely read and seen across 70 countries, including China and Pakistan. He has 13,000 subscribers, an average of 2,000 hits per day, and his viewership on this video channel, Gunner's Shot, has recorded about 5 million views. We welcome you, General Shankar, and I hand over to you to moderate this webinar. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, sir. Good afternoon to everyone, wherever you're listening or tuning into this broadcast from. At the outset, I'd like to thank General Gautam Murthy, for giving me a chance to moderate this important webinar where the panelists are of a very high caliber and those who know Manipur and the Northeast intimately. It's an honor for me to that extent. Right. Getting on to the subject, we know that Manipur has been in a problem for the past 3 months. And a lot of issues have come up, a lot of things are going all around the countryside. But I think this situation in Manipur, which has been in existence for the past 3 months, is a little different. It's a little different and a little more complicated than we normally imagine. And I'll highlight it with two important issues. Right. You have a look at this. This was the event which took place outside Kangla Fort long back, and this signifies the role of women in the society in the Northeast. Now, sometime later, uh, BBC came up and said, "What made these grannies go nude in public?" Right? And this is a question that was asked, and the question today is, where were these grannies when women were paraded nude in Manipur recently? When a thing like this happens in Manipur, where women have the highest regard and are held at the highest esteem, and when women keep quiet, when a similar thing happens to them or the women 20 years later, 19 years later, we have cause of concern. The second cause of concern for me is this. I've never seen in my entire service in the army or afterwards a message like this being put out by the Indian Army of fabricated attempts to malign image of Assam Rifles. Now, as we all know, Assam Rifles, though it's called a central paramilitary force, works under the directions of the operational control of the army, manned by army officers, and as an all India force. It's as good as the army, right? And it is something surprising that the Indian Army and Assam Rifles have to assure the people of Manipur that they continue to remain firm and resolute in their actions. And actually, it is pretty strange because this very, put out questions the role and integrity of the last bastion of the nation, especially when it has been called into question after being requisitioned by the state, and the questioning is by the state itself. When you look at all this, then you start wondering, is this whole situation surreal? There's something absolutely, completely different. This was not the Manipur in which I had served. Of course, at that time also, Manipur had a lot of problems. But the complexity of the problems were not like this. Because these two are just exemplify the current complexity of the problem. Right. And it is to address this and how to take it forward from here and how to find solutions for a vexed people of Manipur, who include Nagas, Kukis, and Metis, all of them Indian nationals, right? And to view it from an Indian viewpoint as it is seen in the Ashoka pillar, which is behind me. We have an eminent panel of General Shaukin Chauhan, General K.H. Singh, and Mr. Sanjay Hazarika. I'd request them to look at it less in the rearview mirror and move forward when they talk. And I request each of them to spend about 15 minutes on what they think of the current situation, what are the way forward, and suggestions forward. And we'll start with General Shaukin Chauhan. Over to you, General Shaukin.
Thank you, sir. It's once again a great pleasure to be with such a eminent panel, moderated by you and General Gautam Murthy, It's always a great honor, sir, and I'm grateful that you have given me the opportunity to come back and speak about Manipur. Uh, Belonging to an area that I have served extensively, and I have such great and deep love uh, for for both Manipur and the people of the Northeast. Now, starting a seminar is always difficult, or a webinar is always difficult, because you have to set the ball rolling in a particular direction. And in the next 10 minutes, let me just talk about a couple of things that have happened. Not in great detail, but just let me sort of put into perspective the elephants in the room. What actually are the issues and how do we move forward? The first issue is that the events leading up to the violence that was there in Churachandpur on April 23rd and later on May 3rd were were not the beginning of this problem. They were a manifestation of an already ongoing brewing problem. The Churachandpur rally, for which the chief minister was to go to organize an open gym, was vandalized by the tribal union students, and subsequently on 3rd of May, the tribal students union had decided on a peace march, which became violent. Uh, During the same time when the peace march was going on, someone desecrated the Anglo-Kuki memorial for the Anglo-Kuki wars that had taken place earlier, early last century, which is in fact a memorial that is revered by the Kukis for their resistance to the British Raj during that particular period. So the violence started because somebody came to know about the desecration of the Kuki memorial, or did the violence start prior to the desecration of the Kuki memorial? And why are these two things connected, and how problems and the subsequent reaction to these issues? The first elephant in the wall here is the origin of the cookies. Uh, a lot of people on the other side, my mighty friends, talk about the illegality of the cookies, the increase in their illegal immigration, and the likelihood that cookie groups from across the border are also interfering and causing mayhem within many Manipuri or mighty communities, many houses, and have killed a lot of people. So, are the cookies actually illegal? What is their origin? I have actually gone through a large number of papers in this regard, and many of these papers talk about cookies having been there almost 2 to 3 centuries ago. Some cookies talk about the fact that they are the ancient Kirat tribe. Talk about their being there to support the kingdom of Manipur many centuries ago. Many of the cookies, when there was a letter floating around, talked about being refugees brought in by the British in the 19th century, late 19th century. Some talk about refugees coming inside in 1960s, in the 1970s, and the slow trickle in of the cookies that has happened over the last century or so. Some talk of the increasing population of cookies, and has this issue, the increasing population of the cookies, made the mighty so insecure about their position in the society that they decided to take them on in the manner that they have taken them on. Second is the issue of narcotics. Now, narcotics is another elephant in the wall, elephant in the room. Is it so bad that violence had to start now? Are Kuki the only tribe involved in narcotics? Has this narcotics issue started now, or has it been a part of the system in the Northeast, or especially in the society in Manipur over the last 20-25 years? I have been a Director General of the Assam Rifles. I've served extensively in the Northeast. And I'm aware that over the last 20-25 years, there has been this issue of poppy cultivation. And whenever the Assam Rifles or the army would get to know about it, we'd go and destroy the poppy fields.
Yeah.
So why has this violence started now? And why has the acrimony between the mighties and the cookies uh, started now, despite the fact that this existed over the last 20, 25 years? So this is the next issue. The next issue is the looting of weapons. If you talk to the mighty community, they talk about the Sioux groups' weapons and a large number of weapons having come in from Burma or Myanmar with the Kuki insurgent groups or with the Kuki extremists. Similarly, almost 5,000 weapons were looted by the mighty insurgents from the Manipur rifles and the Manipur police. And all this looting took place, 5,000 weapons took place without a single shot being fired in anger. So obviously there was state complicity here. And the fact that despite the Home Minister's plea, public plea, to return the weapons, only about 100 weapons have come back. So there were 4,900 weapons still outside, just in the hands of the mighty community. And we're not talking of the weapons that are in the hands of the Kuki community, which are which actually are thought to have been taken out from the Sioux camps. What is the reality? Did the Sioux camps, did all the cadres from the Sioux camps uh, desert? Did they take their weapons along? Did they break the locks that were there? That's an answer that only the army and the Assam Rifles can give. But from my own friends, my friends who are serving in the Assam Rifles and the army, they talk of the fact that only 2 to 3 Sioux camps did the cadres actually desert, and most of the weapons have returned. So this is another issue we must talk about. The next issue is the status of the scheduled caste, scheduled tribe for the Maitis. Uh, is it such a large issue that violence started because of this? What is the actual reality? Is it to buy land in the hills? Is it to change demographics? Will any mighty community, with any middle community, have the ability or would want to go and buy land in the hills? Or is there a greater insecurity here? That's something that we need to look at. And then, of course, as we said, how do we end this violence? What are the steps to end this violence? The first, of course, for ending the violence must stop. The second is the weapons must be returned. The third and the most important question is, where is the civil community? Why aren't the younger people of the civil community who are today leaders in the insurgent groups talking about getting back together? Because they are the people who will suffer the most. In this complex situation, if this continues, it is this younger generation that will lose the opportunity for employment, that will lose the opportunity for education, and the subsequent generations. We have no education at all. So why aren't the civil community, the leaders, the youth leaders of the civil community actually coming out and saying, let's end this violence together? So these are the issues I thought I would talk about, sir, and I'm looking forward to the other panelists. Thank you very much.
Right. Thanks a lot for your comments. The issues you made are the origin of the cookies, narcotics, weapons, state complicity, right, and things like that. And you feel that uh, getting the weapons back, getting the leadership, the youth leadership to the fore, and these would start, getting things back to track. And that means a sort of a dialogue to say peace and talk sense, and let's have basic sense and no violence, right? How to reduce the violence. Thanks for your talk. Thanks for your views. I'll get back to you later. In the meanwhile, let's get Sanjay Hazarika online. Sanjay, over to you. All yours. Let's have your views. Sanjay. Well, he is not at on. So what we'll do is at this point of, yeah, Sanjay Hazarika, he's come. Yeah, Sanjay, your turn, all yours. Please carry on. I can't hear you. You're thinking you're on mute.
Yeah, now I'm okay.
Yeah, you're okay now.
All right. Well, I've listened to General Chauhan very carefully and respect the points you've made, and I would like to thank at the outset Casa and yourself and your colleague for inviting me to this discussion. I will try and be brief and stick to about 5 points. And I will try and wrap up certainly try in about 10 minutes if that's okay. And I don't want to go into the details that General Chauhan has covered, and I think also General Himalaya Singh will go into because he is located on the spot. Now, I think that one of the key things is the issue of accountability in Manipur for what has happened. Who is accountable? At what level? And this trail of accountability must go from bottom to top. And one is not talking about one incident or the others. We've heard that thousands of people have been arrested, but we don't know who they are. So I think that is very important to establish conditions both for peace and for justice, because it's a two-legged thing. You cannot have peace without justice, and you can't have justice without peace. They go together. And I'll come back to this point in a bit, because it's accounted. It's linked to a point that General Chauhan also made, which is you have thousands of weapons which were taken away from armories and other locations without a single shot being fired to push these mobs away, groups away. There must be a reason why this was so. And the fact that such a few number of weapons have been recovered, a fraction of what has been taken, indicates that both sides are gathering weapons, literally digging in for a long haul, a long battle. And one needs to ask the question, why is it that so many efforts by such a large presence of paramilitary army, Assam Rifles in the paramilitary, and the state police have failed to be successful? And that's a point I think that was made earlier. The issue of connivance, the issue of complicity, which brings us again back to the issue of accountability. Because without accountability, you won't have a sense of justice or the reality of peace. So the question is it too late? Not for just peace to return, but for the disarming to take place. What will be involved? What will it entail to try and get these arms out from the civilians and the underground groups which have them? Because as long as these are there cannot be a sense of peace or a sense of stability or security, with people shooting at each other and groups attacking each other from time to time. So the issue of connivance and involvement in the state government and its various agencies is very important to unravel. I hope that the Judicial Commission, which doesn't seem to be functioning yet, will get at least to the bottom of this, although they have only about 3 more months to do their work. There is another issue here of the overall impact on the region and its neighborhood, as well as national policies. I'm referring to what was very briefly mentioned earlier, the Act East policy, earlier the Look East policy. That's really crumbled or gone up in smoke, at least for the time being, because without the access to the borders, without the peace, you will not have, you cannot have the kind of trade and movement of goods and people that the Act East policy envisaged. So basically, in 3 days, 3 decades of work went up in smoke. So how is this to be revived? Because no organization, no investor, no individual with funds, no international institution will put their money where conditions are unsafe or insecure and supply lines are not clear. Then the fourth point I want to touch upon is the issue of narcotics, which John referred to in some detail. And this comes back to the question of accountability. Since there have been attacks on various groups, whether it's the cookies or blaming them for being, cultivating poppy and shipping it out to Myanmar and receiving the finished goods for supply and transit. I think it goes far beyond that, because this is not a new problem. This has been there for decades. And if the issue is there of migration or illegal migration, as some people we wish to talk about, then again we come back to the same issue. What were people doing earlier? This was known, and many of the people in the current dispensation were in the earlier regime. So it's not as if anybody can wash their hands of this, and as it is much a battle for the control of these groups as well as everything else. Now I'll come to the final point of my brief remark here. There are approximately 60,000 people who are still in relief camps, both cookies and Bangladesh. They are in very, very, very bad conditions. Whether it's hygiene, whether it's health, whether it's food supplies, regular food supplies, whether it's medical supplies. And to me, this is one of the most critical things that have to be dealt with and resolved soon. For how long can people live in camps? How long will they be away from what was their home, or were their homes? Will they ever be able to go back? Because these are issues that they think about, I'm sure, on a daily basis, on an hourly basis. How do children go to school or study if they don't have access to the net even? How do people work if they are unable to travel from one point to another to access, and they travel for many hours to one spot which has Aizawl, a city that has an airport, or the limited number of people who can go from Imphal? Because the issue is not limited to Manipur. There are people who fled the violence and have come to Shillong, to Guwahati, to Delhi, Calcutta, Bombay, all over the country. And I think that's something that we have to work on and figure out, because there is no clarity from the government side as to where these people will be settled. Because I think very few of them want to go back to where they originally were before they were displaced and their homes were burnt and attacked. So is the divide going to be cemented by building uh, new settlements uh, where they're considered as uh, in all this, I think there is one issue that comes up. We are all aware of the horrific videos and offensive violence against women and the many allegations that are floating around and the cases which have been tried. Now, beyond that, those who are in the camps, those who experienced the violence and seen it, lost close ones or friends, all of them are affected by trauma. And I think there are very few groups who are doing counseling and reaching out to communities and individuals and people with counseling, with a psychiatric, psychological counseling to enable them to cope with their own nightmares and problems. And to me, that is one of the most important things that we need to focus on. Because to talk about the way forward and to talk about reconciliation and peace is still very early because it's a long haul ahead. Let's just take the example of our brothers and sisters in Nagaland, neighboring Nagaland, where civil society groups have been working for 20, 30 years to bring conflicting tribes together, not just the conflicting insurgent groups, but even tribes, because the divisions go very far and very big. So I'm going to close here with just one thought, which is that the road ahead is very long, but the complex are very complex, and the issues are many. It's not a very happy way to end the conversation or a presentation, but I think we should be very clear that it's not going to be an easy task, and ultimately it is the communities over there which will ultimately bring peace, because without peace and goodwill there cannot be progress. Thank you.
Oh, thanks a lot, Sanjay. I think you've given some important points for all of us to ponder. You spoke of narcotics, you've spoken of accountability, I think, which is very important. But even more important than accountability, you spoke of state connivance, which leads me to another question, but that we'll do later. And then the impact of regional stability and the larger national stability and your larger Act East policy or the Look East policy. Then you touched upon a very important and day-to-day and hands-on issue of what you do with all these people who've been displaced away from their places of stay. And they're virtually internally displaced people in refugee camps. How do you resettle them? Where do they go? And how do them? And the issue of migration, of course, is a thread which is run through what Shokin Chauhan said and what you have said. And the status of women. And what you have painted out is that the way forward and reconciliation is probably the next step. But the immediate requirement is to regain some sense of peace, sanity, and a semblance of order and discipline. Thanks a lot for your comments. I now request General Konsum Himalaya Singh, my old friend Rajput, to take the story forward. And he's speaking from Imphal, so I'm sure he knows the ground situation much better. And all yours, Konsum.
Thank you very much, General Shankar sir. And thank you, General Gautam sir, for your beautiful introduction. My friends, General Shokin, Sanjay Hazarika, good seeing you all once again. I have a difficult task. Initially, I thought I will not look at the rear view, but during the course of last about a few minutes that we have discussed, I will quickly cover in the military parlance the first of all, the violence level here is relatively better, but sporadic violence continues and the recurrence cannot be ruled out. I have a feeling that perhaps both the groups who are fighting reach some kind of a culmination point where both are
Okay.
tired and looking for solutions. The second issue is the heavily armed groups, both sides continue, and 1,350 weapons were recovered from those looted, 1,350 odd looted. And both sides continue to be heavily armed. I estimate that approximately anything between 3,000 to 4,000 weapons are on both the sides each. Suspension of operations groups at one time, that was about 35 days after the violence. The strength in the camps had gone down to about 40%. I'm not very sure about the last few days because I have just returned from abroad. Highly weaponized society continues to create fears amongst people on border sides. The governance remains crippled. Displaced people are the main focus, should be the focus. I think government assistance are going, but far too little. Poppy plantation and drug has been going on since 1970s, as far as my knowledge goes. But the Myanmar, uh, the military takeover in Myanmar about 2.5 years back, that renewed the focus of the uh, Golden Triangle tilting towards the west. And also, if you see, last 3-4 years back, the US and the West had come down heavily in Thailand and those areas of Golden Triangle, and possibly last few years saw a rise. Just for your information, the area that has been photographed in the entire Manipur, if those poppy plantations are actually harvested, the amount only in Manipur, would have crossed one uh, harvest would have got about 60 to 80,000 crores. And generally in a year, 2 to 3 harvesting are supposed to be done. So that is the scale of the opi and drugs here. And earlier it used to go back to Myanmar for processing. Now the processing units are also in this side of the border. So we are talking about a drug business worth anything more than 40 to 60,000 crores a year at a very, very conservative estimate. And most of the proceeds will definitely go to the anti-national elements. The regarding the situation is such that eh, you know the Naga talks are going on, NSC and IM talks are going on, and any kind of uh, we cannot allow both sides are looking at the Naga groups as to for their support. So this is a very dangerous trend. Cross-border issues. I will like to flag very important issue of national security here. The when you get where the ports of Chinese Myanmar Economic Corridor, that Kyaukphu port, where the Chin National Army is active, then how does India's active policy actually get uh, will will it come out in the face of this CMEC is another factor. There are many other issues which have come up very recently in the Middle East, in the media about hydrocarbons and crop. Is there a disturb? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear
Okay.
you.
So these issues are there. But since 2012, no extraction or no activity are taking place because of illegal demands of for extortion purpose. Most of the firms have gone back. And lastly, Supreme Court monitored inquiries, CBI inquiries, and also Judicial Commission. They are in progress. This is roughly what the review of the situation is. Now I will come to some of the issues, the narratives which are being floated around. It is not a religious issue at all. It is not about Christian minority and Hindu majority. In fact, Christians are the majority here in Manipur, Hindus are the minority. It is not about tribal or non-tribal issue. And I totally agree that given status of scheduled tribes, the Meitei group, I don't think really that anyone would actually want to go to the hills and settle there. This is my assessment. And also, people are discussing about Armed Forces Special Power Act. As you know, 19 police stations cover about half of the valley areas, approximately half, and most of the areas where the violence or attacks and counterattacks are going on, most of them are under OSPA. Uh, these are some of the issues that I thought I must bring it out before I get into the recommendations, or this, which is the main issue about way forward. I will group this into two subheadings. One is the short term, which I'll tackle first, and another is the long term, as I see it. Short term, obviously, my co-panelists have they brought it out, disarming or de-weaponizing the people, the illegal, getting the weapons back, all these illegal weapons should be the first priority. As I said earlier, the Sioux groups, we have the records up to 2008, but beyond 2008 till now, last 15 years, there are no records of recruitment or arms weapons having been, there are no records of that. So that is why I made that a rough estimate. So de-weaponize the society is the first priority. And a lot of people tell me about then make it OSPA. As I said, the OSPA has been taken out from the valley, from 19 police stations, generally near the very populated areas like Imphal and all. But I think the concept of buffer zone, which is going on, we must start reviewing whether military should get involved in buffer zone and things like this. It must be, in fact, we must go a little more proactive to actually start like cordon and search and take it on to recover those weapons. Because as long as these weapons are there, the violence in some form will continue. This brings me to the next point of our unified headquarters, the rules of engagement as to how do we see the end state, making what is the role of the civil armed police forces, what is the role of Manipur police with the military, Assam rifles, and this. So I think there has to be a little more focus towards the end state that we want to achieve. That I'm not seeing it being, or at least on ground. The third issue is about the various initiatives by the CSOs and various people. They are in progress, but little headway. But I'm confident that this must be taken very seriously, and many CSOs are involved, and I know for sure that people are trying that, and they must try it harder, because if you recollect, the peace committee was not agreed to by one group because they wanted the CM to be removed. Yes, even if it has to be recasted, it must be done. Peace committee, we at least the semblance of order I declare 2012, Kofi Annan, a US General Secretary, was called in Myanmar, and he headed the peace committee. So this kind of a recasted with credible face internationally or even nationally should be co-opted for this peace committee to be reactivated, can be interfaith or whatever it is, must be uh, so that the initiate dialogue. Without dialogue, nothing can happen. Without dialogue, nothing can happen. People met to sit together, and that has to be facilitated largely by the center, according to my understanding. And the other point is about the Sioux groups. There is an impression that the Sioux groups are not really observing the Sioux group. There's, but then other side is also that in this situation, the Sioux agreement may not be observed because of the peculiar condition. So this has to be looked into a little more seriously. Other point I would like to bring is that accountability. Sanjay Hazarika had mentioned it should be. It is like it has to be done faster. We cannot endless kind of inquiries will not because there has to be some kind of a threat or some kind of a fear deterrence of people undergo trying to resort to violence. The next point it comes to is the border belts. Border belts, I'm afraid illegal activities continue even today. Uh, this is something that has to be addressed. Otherwise, illegal activities does help into violent in this does help in perpetuating the violence that is going on. And last but not the least, the political, as far as short-term measures are concerned, the political direction has to be facilitated in such a divided kind of atmosphere by the center. Uh, People discuss about PR or Article 355 and all that. That is a political issue which I would not like to comment on. But the only thing I would like to say here is that when the instruments, when the structures are crumbled, how do we actually get the things going again with the change in the whether it is 355 or 56. But if it comes to the requirement, so be it. Coming down to the long term. Long term is more important as I see it because the legacy issues for last many years, all these are manifestations of collection of various issues at the policy levels or even rules, regulations, or whatever policies that we have been following for last 40, 50 years. My first recommendation would be that the peace talks, which when we initiate as a country, as a nation, it should be generally seen to be all inclusive groups, uh, with most of the groups, not deal separately because we have a Naga talks going on, the Kuki talks going on, and then some talks even with Metis groups. So it has to be seen to be a little more focused towards a. Uh, I'm not saying that all peace talks will have a similar kind of a solution, but at least the agreed points should keep in mind the national security factor, and then at least the minimum base of agreements should be seen to be uh, being followed by those people who are involved in the talks. The second issue that I would like to flag is the FMR. A lot of misunderstanding about there was some commentator who said that these since the FMR is there, what is the point there? They can come and go. Yes, it is 48 hours as per the agreement, and 16 kilometers. Those who they can stay for 16 kilometers. So the in the process, somebody made a comment in the TV day for yesterday that there were only 2,500 illegal migrations. That was detected only in 7 villages, that too within a period of 1.5 months. It does not include the entire Manipur state. So some kind of a nobody's nobody's saying that everybody is a foreigner or something, but anyone who has come illegally in the last few years, particularly after the Myanmar junta crackdown, and maybe some people are talking about 1960s and all, uh, because I know for sure that 15th century or 16th century records of the King's Chronicle of Manipur does mention a presence of many cookies that time, even that. So that is that. Another is the factor of uh, the the how we should approach the solution should be uh, more transparent, and then we should not promise make promises which cannot be made uh, by the stakeholders, those who are involved. And devolution of power, I don't think anybody has gone against that, except that they want to see the idea of Manipur intact, even if it is devolution of power. And I think there is a general agreement on that, and there is a even they have agreed. Manipur Legislative Assembly has passed many, I think twice, that devolution of powers to the district councils must be made, which I fully endorse. The governance issues is another very long-term issue, because all these are manifestations of kind of failure of near failure of governance, uh, equality, or even robust institutions. When we don't create it, everything crumbles in the first few minutes or few days. So that is something that we need to uh, ensure. And people talk about NRC or something. It is not, NRC has not been successful in Assam, but some efforts to identify anyone who is come and not be allowed to exercise their um, rights as a citizen. They can stay as refugees. This kind of exercise will also be helpful because of the soft or open border. That is something it will address long-term interests also. And finally, as far as the long term is concerned, the the vision of Northeast, the security architecture needs a serious relook. We have the Assam police fighting with Mizoram police, and if border issues are there, then 1,762 open borders are there. We do not, and then people are talking about illegal migrations from Bangladesh, and what will happen with all these extremist groups operating around, and what will happen with the Chinese activities, and at least in that corridor of CMEC, and of course multiple 16 armed groups in Myanmar who are far more powerful than our own armed militants groups here. So all these are long-term issues which I would definitely recommend that these be re-looked into. I think I have just crossed about 15 minutes.
That's okay.
Any other pending issues, I think we can cover it during. Thank you very much for your
Question.
patient hearing. Thank you.
Right. Thanks a lot, Konsum. I think you brought out a lot of issues which are important to get peace back into the system and long-term issues. A few things which I'd like to highlight at the end of listening to all of you. A major issue which General K.H. Singh brought out is the issue of poppy cultivation and all that, and the golden triangle. I'd like to tell you, the other day I was doing an analysis of Afghanistan and the issues thereon. And there, it is now internationally established and through satellite photographs that the poppy cultivation in the Taliban ruled Afghanistan has been wiped out. And these are photographic evidences published in international media. The Taliban is not allowing poppy cultivation to grow there. If poppy is not cultivated in Afghanistan, which is which was the major supplier of drugs in the international market, then it is only axiomatic that the golden triangle enlarges. If the golden triangle enlarges, again it is axiomatic that it will grow in Manipur. And to my simple way of thinking, it will not grow only in Manipur. This problem is not confined to Manipur alone. It will spread to Nagaland and to Mizoram also in due course. It's a matter of time. What we have seen, this business of narcotics coming up on and again in Manipur, is just a symptom and the tip of the iceberg. And at some level, this is also the root of the problem in Nagaland. Because money, and if there is so much money and if there's so much narcotics, politics can't be far behind. If politics are not far behind, the rest of the things actually fall in place. And those of you who doubt what I'm saying, I can give you photographs, satellite images of the loss of, or rather, the stoppage of cultivation of poppy in Afghanistan. In fact, I've done a video on this on Gunner Shot itself uh, with Lieutenant General Dushyant Singh. Okay, now having heard all of you, there is also a huge external factor. The external factor is a sandwich of four issues. One is the border security and the border tightening or the border control, whatever you call it. The second is how do you ensure that the external insurgency or the problem or the civil war in Myanmar doesn't spill over here, like what General K. said, that there is issue that side. And the insurgents and people out there are better armed on the other side. The third is, of course, the drug issue, and fourth is the Chinese hand. So the government of India has to be very cognizant of the fact that the external problem has to be dealt by them and them alone, and that is one major part of the reason. I mean, solution which I'd like to flag. Okay, so I'll first, uh, I don't see very great questions from the audience on any of this thing, so I'll take it on. The first question, the issue which I think everyone accepts is you need to disarm people. You need to reduce the state of violence and get some, peace back into the area. And I think the best persons to do it are the armed forces in one way or the other, whether you like it or not. So the question is, and this question I'll put to General Shaukin Chauhan: how do you think the armed forces can be empowered to take this forward, to do the de-arming, to get peace, and getting peace back into the system? Considering that what Gates has said, that for most parts, ASFA has still there. It's only in populated parts that ASFA is not there. Over to you, Shaukin.
Thank you, sir. Now, disarming is a complex process, sir. Disarming needs an agreement, and between the community, that needs an agreement between the armed groups, and without that agreement, they will not give up their weapons. So it brings back into focus, sir, the two issues that you had spoken about and I had spoken about, as well as General Khonsam had spoken about, and Sanjay, was the issue about, firstly, the status of the central forces that are in Manipur. Legally, under what frame or under what law are they operating? Uh, is the army operating under the Armed Forces Special Powers Act? And since much of the problem is also, sir, as Jan K put it, is the buffer zone between the Kukis and the Maitis, which is on the fringes of the Imphal Valley. So, do they need the AFPA there? Is the AFPA actually is in place there? The second issue is that since I have negotiated with the Naga groups, all this disarming could only take place if we have a cogent agreement with them. Uh, that agreement is not there. I see no way that any of the groups are actually going to hand over their weapons. We talk about terminating. In fact, the Chief Minister Biren terminated the SU agreement, but of course, he is not the main decider here. It's the Ministry of Home Affairs, which has not terminated this as suspension of operation agreement with the Kuki. So, if the Kukis are not going to hand over, simply because they're not sure how will they be protected in case something was to go wrong. And the same way, the Maitis holding the 4,500 odd weapons, or maybe 4,000 weapons, are going to take similar actions. So, in a small place like uh, Manipur is what 32 lakh square kilometers, you have almost 20,000 weapons floating around, which is hell of a lot of weapons for a small area like that. And with these kind of weapons in the hands of young uh, young insurgents, hot-blooded insurgents, filled with revenge and hatred, anything can happen. Absolutely anything. In fact, the recent issue of August 4th, if you remember, sir, the issue about where three Maitis were killed in the Quata village, you had a situation when the Manipur commandos were retaliating against Kuki villages who may or may not have been involved. And I was talking to the officer on the spot, and he said, "Sir, I prevented a massacre of almost 200 to 300 people could have died if I had allowed, or if the army had allowed the Manipur commandos to go to and destroy those two villages, the Kuki villages on the fringes." So these are problems, sir, which have to be sorted out before we can talk of disarmament. Absolutely, there is a need for the civil society and the younger members of the civil society to get together to sort this out. Uh,
Right.
Over to you, sir.
Thanks a lot. Sanjay, are you there or you're out?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, good.
I'm having some issues with my
No
net
problem.
connection in Shillong.
No
So,
issues. Yeah,
can
just
I
continue.
make a few points?
Yeah, please. Go ahead.
So I'm just keeping my video off so that
Yeah,
um,
no
I can
problems.
speak clearly.
Yeah.
I think the first point I'd like to make is that, as both General Singh, General Chauhan, and you have, and the others have said, this is not an issue which is just limited to Manipur. This is broad ranging, which crosses boundaries, but it also is a national security issue which impacts all of India. It's not limited to one state. Now, this is something that has come up time and again. It has come up in the past and other incidents. It's come up here, and people who have been demonstrating in Delhi and others have said, if this had happened in any other state of India outside of the Northeast, you think the government of India would have let it run, the fires burn for 3 months? I think that is a question that everybody is asking. That's one. The second is related to the issue of illegal migration, which I agree is an extremely important one, but I think we need to differentiate between people who are refugees, who are fleeing a civil war situation in Myanmar, just ordinary poor people trying to survive, which is about 8 or 9,000, which have come over in the last few years actually. In Mizoram there are 40,000, but in Manipur there are about 8 or 9,000 refugees. I'm not talking about illegal migrants because we must make that differentiation because refugees are not illegal migrants. They are protected by international conventions because they cannot be sent back to a land where they are facing persecution and violence. That is something into which India is also, although it's not a signatory to the Refugee Convention, there is a process of natural law which we accept. That's the second thing. And we need to find out, because this issue has come up time and again. In Assam, the NRC has been, frankly, a bit of a flop. Nobody's satisfied with it. And to try and do that in Manipur also is certainly not a good idea because it's being bedeviled with many problems, both practical, factual, and otherwise, and it's still unresolved. So this may create more problems than anything else. I think that already there has been some sort of a survey of local communities and outside communities in Manipur. But I think we need to be clear on what is an illegal migrant, who is an illegal migrant, and who is not. That clarity needs to come among all of us now who are here. The third point is on drugs. I mean, initially the Northeast was a transit point. I mean, the whole process of drug movement is that you have a transit economy, then you develop a community, local community of users. Then the users become the conduits for the local population and expanding the use of narcotics. And so you have transit, you have local use, and you have supply lines. Uh, and that's what's happening in many states of the Northeast, not just in Manipur. The fourth point is really regarding what the Supreme Court talked about, the breakdown of constitutional machinery. I mean, that perhaps is not that visible now, but essentially you have one government in the valley and perhaps a different kind of governance in the hills. And this is extremely alarming unless communities come together and start talking to each other quietly, off the record, and in closed doors. And there's one point I'll finally close with, which is that the government of India and the United States issued a statement on June 20th. It's a long statement during Prime Minister Modi's visit, in which there's one paragraph on Manipur. It's, I think, paragraph 20 or something, point number 20, in which it basically, the position taken there changes India's position held over many years during the civil war in Myanmar, which is that both parties, both governments called upon Myanmar essentially to release political prisoners and move towards a process of multi-party democracy. And the Burmese government, Myanmar government, reacted very strongly to this in the next few days. And I believe that they were reassured that this was not a change in policy. But one is naturally concerned that these sort of reactions could enable both the Myanmaris to play a more active role in the supporting the various insurgent groups, and they were limited to one group alone, as also opening a window for China. Because China, as you know, is very close to Myanmar and is deeply involved in the situation there, much more than we are, frankly,
Yeah.
and more effective. So I just wanted to make those brief points, and over to you.
Yeah, thanks a lot. From the points which you have given and what we could make out from what General KH and General Shopin Chauhan have given, very clearly one issue is emerging. That the situation is just not an internal situation of Manipur alone. It's a situation which has gone beyond the state of Manipur, regionally and internationally. So, and very frankly, with take into account what the Supreme Court has said and the manifestations of what is happening on ground, and the leadership at the state level is no more in the saddle, to be very right, or it's not riding the horse very clearly. So there is a requirement of a change, and the change in leader, whether you want to call it a change in the leadership, whether you call it a change, imposition of president's rule, or you have a committee or peace committee or something, or you have an advisory board, telling the chief minister, or you have a center state issue where a minister, a central minister oversees the whole thing, or the home minister goes and sits there. You need something different to do. Doing the same thing all over and over and over again, which has been done for the past 4 months, won't work. That's very clearly emerged. Right. Now I'll take a few questions which have come from the people in. Right. Shritik Kotari says, how do various security forces, Assam Rifles, police, CRPF work together? What mechanism to coordinate, communicate, and share info and intelligence? Also, opinion on police filing FIR against Assam Rifles recently. Any views, General KH?
There are two parts to the question, mechanism to coordinate, communicate, and share info intelligence. Uh, Mr. Kothari, it is unified command or unified headquarters has been established in Manipur, and the security advisor is responsible to do whatever you are saying about the coordination and communicate and info intelligence. That is the role of the army as such, where we need to be clear: is it law and order, is it ethnic violence, or is it counterinsurgency? That's what I mentioned as the rules of engagement need to be clarified as a directive. I'm referring particularly for the Indian Army. Your next part of the question is opinion on police firing FIR against some rifles. Obviously, it's not a desirable thing at all. What the only thing I would like to say is that perceptionally in Manipur, because of past history and the records, I can quote many examples. Somehow there is a suspicion amongst the people about certain activities of some elements, maybe individual level at the law level. I said suspicion. So because of that, there has been a groundswell of opposition to only 2 to 3 units, not all. The entire force cannot be blamed. 2 or 3 units. So we need to work harder towards removing such kind of a doubts. We act good and also be seen to be acting in the right manner. But to blame the Assam Rifles, the entire force, obviously that may not be the right approach. Is not desirable either. That is not good. So the police firing a fire against some rifle is a sad thing which should not have happened. But the groundswell of emotive issues that have come up. So that is the reason. Otherwise, I think this is being sorted out. And some rifles has done a few days back, only day for yesterday. Chief Minister of Manipur had praised some rifles for bringing those people who had fled from More towards Myanmar, and they have been brought back by Assam Rifles. And they were also involved in saving evacuation of thousands of people, many thousands. So they've done a good job. But as I said, one odd bad apple can spoil the entire image of the force because civilians don't know uh, which unit and things like that. That is why they blame. Otherwise, I think by and large, I hope uh, your question has been answered.
Yeah, we'll take it as that because, right. The next issue is central government's abdication of responsibility or tacit support in the current situation is worsening the situation beyond a retrievable point. Uh, General Shaukin, do you think this is a right thing to say or a wrong position, or what's your view about the whole affair? And I mean, let's even if you feel that's not the right way to look at it, is there more what the central government can do? Maybe that's a more positive way of looking at it because I'm just invoking the theme. Don't take his words at face value.
It's difficult to talk about the central government's abdication of responsibility. I would much rather talk of the local government, the state government's issue, and the fact that the state government has lost its credibility with a certain section of its people is disheartening. The central government, as far as I'm concerned, has pushed in the central forces. Almost 60,000 plus forces are there who are supposed to take action. The rest would be a political action, which, as you know, I don't discuss whether the party could have removed the chief minister or not. That's a totally different issue, sir. But as far as I'm concerned, it is the state government that has abdicated its responsibility with the state chief minister having lost credibility with a great number of people in his state. So maybe, as all of us have been talking about, maybe there might be an issue about the changing of the leadership. Maybe there might be a requirement of a group of people mandated to talk to each other. So these are issues, sir, which are difficult to comment on, mainly because we don't stay there. We can only study it from far. We can only see the situation.
Yeah,
But as far as governance is concerned, it would definitely be the complexity of the state government.
right. Oh, this is a bit of provocative remark, but I'll still take it because unless you tackle the tough parts of this problem, you'll never get there. He says an imposed peace will neither stop the demand for Zalangam, nor will it help the Meiteis, whose society is economically unviable now. Is there a way out without removing Sioux and doing large scale army operations on the hills? Sanjoy, your view, and then I'll get it on to KH back. All yours.
I think this is a very interesting point. I think that what has to happen is you need conversations among all sides, because I don't buy the line that the army can solve a problem. It can do a holding operation, or the security forces. It can reduce the levels of violence, but ultimately both sides have to at some point talk to each other, because that's the only way. The economy does not depend on one group alone. The economy involves everybody, whether it is traditional goods, whether it's manufactured goods, of which there's very little certainly in the border states of the region. And if the Act East policy is to really take off, then all groups will have to act. You cannot have a situation where borders are inaccessible and roads, highways are closed either by one group or the other. That, I think, is one of the most critical points. Nobody is going to invest in a region just because uh, you know the government is saying please invest here. They're hard-headed businessmen and organizations will look at the peace, the peace potential, the actual return to them, and how they stand to frankly benefit from the make profits out of that situation, and in the process generate local employment and so on. So I think it's in everybody's interest actually to get this process moving together. You can't do it in bits and pieces.
Yeah,
I'll stop
I,
there.
I I think, yeah, I think you made very valid points. You can't do it in bits and pieces. You have to do it holistically. The armed forces hold the peace and hold the ground, whereas there's a political process which has to start, right? And frankly speaking, both these are nowhere on the horizon at this point of time. We don't see it. It might be happening behind screens, but you don't see it. Nor is there anything on ground, unless, of course, KH. What are your feelers and what is your view and something about it? Do you think it happening?
As Sanjay made a interesting point, I also agree with him that any policy has to be carrot and stick. Only carrots don't work.
Yeah,
Stick also, it needs to be. So the carrot part, I will not talk. The question is about the stick part, I think. So I briefly mentioned about the Sioux agreement and also about possible army operations. I won't say army operation in the hills. If it comes to it, it should be across the board, not only in the hills, to disarm these militant groups wherever they are. Uh, the question is very important because whether or not removing Sioux will benefit. Right now, there are two thoughts which are in vogue. Removing Sioux will actually increase the violence. That is one uh, will actually one way of thinking. The other side says that you remove the SU and then please carry out to disarm them, the militant groups. So this is something which is the question of removing SU and large-scale army operations will have to be taken with careful considerations, keeping all this in mind. But the issue of Jalingam, which the question, whoever has put the question, um, is also it used to be a dream in the last 20 years back, but if it is a serious demand or serious effort towards it, then it has to be curbed because it talks about various borders across the international border and parts of Manipur and Mizoram and parts of this kind of a thing. We cannot let it happen in a very very sensitive uh, place like Northeast India. We cannot have further uh, division of people in this already divided society.
Thank you, General KH, for that views. And you are indeed right that we cannot afford to let this happen, to let various groups with competing demands to come up. Now, there is just one more question. General Shankar is back, and may I
Yeah,
request
please, yeah, carry on, carry on,
yeah,
carry on.
there is just one more question over here, and it's from Varun VC, who says, "Could you throw a little light on the recent killings of 3 volunteers in Ukrul? Is this an escalation, or do you see it as a one-off event?" And the other larger question, he says, the government says they're in control, but what is the meaning? What tantamounts to being in control? Uh, Again, I'd like General KH to please take it on. The first part.
Sir, I'm not seeing the question.
Okay.
Can you just repeat, sir? Because I was trying to look at the
Whose
questions
question is
to
this?
that. Yeah.
Varun VC.
Yeah, yeah,
The first question for
yeah,
General
yeah.
KH,
I'll do it. I'll do it. I'll put it.
and the second question for
Yeah,
Shokin,
yeah.
please.
Could you throw a little light on the recent killing of 3 volunteers in Ukrul? Is this an escalation or a one-off event? We'll take the second one later. First one.
Uh, I feel that any killing of anyone on both sides is a escalation because there will be reaction. An eye for eye, then attacks and counterattacks. So, but these what information I got is that it was isolated village and some armed groups uh, supposedly suspected to have been from the Meitei groups. But this kind of a killing cannot go on endlessly. It has to be controlled. So we come back to the same point that unless border communities come together, these killing and counter killing, attacks and counter attacks, if it goes into a spiral, then things will not work out. So I agree with you. It is not one off event. Uh, as I see it, it's like a retaliation of a certain action that may or may not have taken place, but in their issue, they feel that this is the retaliation for something that they feel that they have been harmed. So therefore, I think in clear terms, it can be escalatory in nature.
Right. The second part of this question is the government says they are in control. What tantamounts to be in control? I mean, I think peace and normalcy is what amounts to control. And beyond that, I don't think this thing very clearly, the control is not there. So I'll not direct it against anyone at this point of time. I'll take one question which I've been seeing, which has a issue, but I'll still take it. Yeah, Shokin, you have a wider view of the Northeast. He says, what is the role of evangelists from Tamil Nadu politics and Karnataka state connected with Manipur's situation? Do you think there's a issue which is an overflow of this evangelism from here to there through the churches?
Sir, I agree with General Concern that it's not a religious issue.
Yeah,
So
I
to
also
bring
agree
in a
with you,
question which
mind you.
involves evangelists would be unfair to the problems on the ground. We shouldn't throw another rabbit in the air. We should be very clear that this
Yes.
is a community issue. We should restrain it and keep it to that. And even commenting on something like this is dangerous because it's not a religious issue. I agree with Jen KH. We must not even allow it to move from that small little space that it is.
True.
Yeah. I completely agree with both of you, in fact, all of you. I asked this question with a specific purpose. We need to convey it to everyone there's no religious angle. And for some reason or the other, the issue here and in many places and in social media still continues that there's a religious angle.
Absolutely.
The issue still continues that there is a tribal angle, tribal, non-tribal angle, there's an ethnic angle. The issue is still there that it's a major migrant problem. There is a migrant problem, there's no doubt. In fact, I will put it as this, there are three parts to this problem. One, there's a problem of migrants, which are there. The second is part of people who have settled here for a long time, which is also a fact of life. There are no more migrants, they're people of this state and this country. And the third part, which Sanjay very clearly brought out, is the issue of refugees who come here. And it needs sensitive handling from all around, and it needs a mechanism which is much beyond all this. Sir, do we have any questions further to take, or should we wrap it up? Gautam, sir.
There is one question from JBJP. If you could put it on, it has to be addressed. I think we are a good forum
Yeah,
to
you're
address
talking
this.
of this?
No. The next one, the cookie speaker after speaker on Karan Thapar's show from Manipur has said the solution is the creation of a separate cookie land state. Is this? Why don't we
Yeah.
address his ground reality? Is
Okay,
what he's
fine.
asking. But
Ask
this,
Cookie speaker after speaker on current Tapar show from Manipur has said solution is creation of a separate cookie land state. Why don't we address the ground realities that cookies are demanding openly? Look, sir, I mean, let me put it as a moderator and people, as someone who's been there for a long time, has had repeated tenures in that area. Let me answer that so that, someone from within need not. I don't think it's a bad idea. Today, you'll start saying cookie land. Tomorrow, someone will say Dimasa land. Third, someone will say Nagaland. Nagaland is a different story, right? Someone will come up with some other tribe and he'll say something else, right? So I don't think that's a good idea at all. That means a completely new story which is starting off, and it goes against the very fundamental precepts of India, right? We can't keep reorganizing states like this.
absolutely
From a
right.
huge state of Assam, one single state of Assam, we have broken it into 7 parts. And I don't think breaking it anymore is the answer. Or someone will say Assam is a big state, so break it into Bodoland and all these issues will come out. Karbi land and Dimasa land. So I don't think there'll be a snooker ball effect all over the place. So that's not a good idea at all, and that's my view. And I'm sure most will agree. And more than anyone else, I'm sure Sanjay will agree with me on this issue. That you can't keep dividing a state into its constituent parts just because you can't govern the people. That's a political failure, right?
Absolutely.
I
Can I come
Yeah,
in
please,
very
please.
briefly?
Yeah. Sanjay, please carry on.
Yeah, the thing I wanted to say is that there were two things. One is, I think General Himalaya Singh mentioned this, the idea of Manipur. You know, different people have different groups have different perspectives of the idea of Manipur, just as if the idea of India. The idea of India is changing all the time. And what happened in Assam in '72 and even later was at a different political situation. There was a different political situation overall when the Assamese leadership felt it was more important to accept the fact that there should be changes, and there was negotiation over a long period of time with the hill groups in Meghalaya that enabled this process of the division of the state to take place. Uh, and there was limited violence, but there was no insurgency in as far as Meghalaya was concerned, and the development of that state. It's 50 years since, so it's a long time ago, and the demands which are coming up, you know, there's always Article 3 of the Constitution, as we all know, which says the center can change the boundaries of states, but it's not going to do that in Manipur because that will just add to the fire. So I think it's very important for us to realize, at least for me to realize, that things are possible in different political situations, overall political situation. Sometimes you can do it, sometimes you can't. And I think it's very important for us to recognize that.
Yeah. I think you made a very important point, and I think we'll not take any more questions. I think we've covered the whole thing in a fairly broad spectrum manner. And most of the issues which are involved have come out. And what's come out? Manipur, if it was a hydra-headed state earlier, it's added a few more heads today. And right, and it needs a different kind of handling. It needs a different kind of a political approach than what was there before. The Assam of the 80s, the issues then, and the kind of insurgency then, and the emotives then, or the Bodoland activities then, have no bearing with what it is today. Today, the thing is far more complex. When I look back on my service in Assam and in Ulfa territory, or for that matter in NC Hills, much later as a brigadier, and today in Manipur, let me tell you, my own experience tells me that this is a far more complex situation than what is there earlier. And the political situation of the country is also far more complex than what it was earlier, which Sanjay made a very valid point. Second, a very, very, very major issue which General KH brought out is the fact that there is a huge international and an external dimension to this problem. And that problem resides in China, that problem resides in the Golden Triangle, and that problem resides in Myanmar. And that needs to be addressed simultaneously. And if you don't address that at the center level, things in Manipur will not resolve themselves, right? And of course, to resolve issues in the state itself, you need to resolve its internal political machinery, which General Shaukin Chauhan has very clearly said that it is broken down to a large extent. And I wouldn't say broken down, it's dysfunctional. If it is there, it's dysfunctional, right? And it is so dysfunctional that no group is happy with the whole story there. And so far, whatever is happening in Manipur, one point which we missed saying the whole day is that it concerns only two groups, Kukis and Metis. There's a third group, which is a huge group called the Nagas. What if they come into the fray due to whatever reason happens? Because for 5-6 months, it has not happened. This is like a tinderbox which can spread. And that's what Sanjay was also saying. There's a larger issue of the Northeast stability which is at stake, right? So we've outlined the problems. Yes, there are certain solutions. You could change the leadership. There are many options to change the leadership. There are many issues of peace committees. You could have a commission, you could have a central commission, you could have a Supreme Court judge, you could have many others, but you need to have something. The fact that there is no option, I don't think we've gone past the point where we have an option of doing something different. We have to do something. And of course, the shortest thing and the basic thing which we need to do is to regain peace and stop violence. I wouldn't even say collect weaponry back. In some manner or the other, you just have to enforce peace. And that start point of peace has to be through dialogue and the stick of the armed forces, right? With a clear understanding between the civil and the military, which at this point of time one sees, light between the two windows. The cracks in this window are there, and that I think has to come on one footing, because whatever my experience of the Northeast is, this is the first time I'm seeing a difference of opinion between the armed forces and the political entities, the manner which it has come about. Right? Yeah, we've had a lot of issues earlier also. I've also had difference of opinion with the governments with which whom I functioned there, but they were never in the manner in which they're here. So they have to get onto the same page one way or the other. Right? I'm thankful to my esteemed panelists who've thrown real good light on the issues involved and brought forth the issues for everyone to see. I am very sure that those of you who have seen it, some might be happy with the answers given, some might be happy with the views given, some might have views completely opposite to what has been expressed here. But generally, that's the way democracy functions, right? And we have to start accommodating each other to come to a centrist point of view and come onto one track, right? I thank all of you once again. With this, sir, General Gautam Moti, sir, over to you and for your closing remarks.
I think we've had a very, very frank and very free flowing discussion on the way ahead and how to resolve this crisis. Lots of issues, contentious issues have been discussed with a great deal of maturity and a lot of experience of this wonderful, wonderful panel of General Shokin Chauhan, Sanjay Hazarika, and General KH. They brought their experience to the fore. I thank them on behalf of Team Casa and thank all the participants for their spending the Sunday afternoon listening to us. And above all, I'd like to thank General P.R. Shankar for his wonderful moderation and the way he's guided this discussion, and for letting Casa use his gunner shot StreamYard account. Thank you very much, General Shankar, and we are indeed indebted to you. And as a founder member of Casa also, thank you very much for this wonderful show. And let us hope and pray that these suggestions are carried forward and peace returns to Manipur. The people deserve peace and harmony. They don't deserve this hate and violence that has come about. They need to put the differences aside and work together. Thank you. Thank you all. Jai Hind.
Jai Hind.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Oh, welcome,
Thank you
sir.
very much. Thank you very much.
You can
Jai
hold
Hind.
on. We'll
Excellent. I thought this was an excellent discussion. And